Hi, good morning, and welcome to Chit Chat with Char. I am Charmaine Byers, and our mission is to connect, collaborate, and cultivate. Today, I have the distinct honor of chatting with my cousin, who is a author of a magazine, an online magazine, and his name is Mr. Michael Jones. Without further ado, come on down, Michael. I want you to share with us your background and everything that you want to share. It's so good to see your face. How are you?
Good to see you too. I am well in the middle of a busy day. As you said, I'm a journalist and I write a newsletter, magazine, whatever you want to call it, called Supercreator. And it is what I describe as a daily politics newsletter for the creative class. And so, really, what I spend my days doing is tracking what's going on in politics, what's going on in business, what's going on in Silicon Valley to really help creative people understand how to reclaim their power and use it to get the economic, social, and cultural capital that they deserve. And so I've been doing it since 2019. I was originally a fashion editor, so I moved to New York in 2014 to pursue my dreams as a fashion editor, and really saw how fractured and broken corporate media, mainstream media really was. And so I took a leap and took a risk and decided to become an independent journalist and really use my voice, use my skills, use my reporting to really support creative people, especially those who identify as Black, brown, women, queer, really help creative people understand that they have a voice, that they deserve representation, that they deserve to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. And that's really what I spend a lot of my time doing. And I can't believe that my life and my career has taken me up to this point, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I'm so grateful and blessed to be doing what I'm doing.
That is awesome. So, you mentioned creative people. You said that a couple of times. What
Yeah.
is the definition of a creative person?
Yeah. So I think creativity is inherent to humanity. I think one of the things that's amazing about humans is that we're really the only species that can like think of something and then do it. Like we're the only people that can say, I'm hungry, I want a burger, and then go make a burger. You know, if you look at a squirrel, the nut has to exist for them to eat. Like they've got to go find the nut. But for me, you know, if I, want a chicken breast, I can get off this podcast and, fix me up something. And so creativity is inherent to humanity. But when I think of creative people, what I'm talking about and how I define it, internally when I think about my work is people who use their gifts, their skills, their talents for the progress and pleasure of other people. So people who use you're a creative person with this podcast, using your voice, using technology to offer progress or pleasure to other people. And so it's someone who doesn't just consume, because we all consume. We all take in things. We all like entertainment. We all like news. We all like those things. But creative people take it a step further and they take what they consume, they take their input and then turn it into like a valuable piece of output that other people can enjoy.
I love it. I love it. Okay, well, I just wanted to share that, to get that out there. So, you mentioned in your introduction that you made a decision to move to New York,
Yeah.
and back in 2014. That was a shock and a surprise for our family, but it was exciting, And so, tell us a little bit about what helped you to make that decision to step out on faith, with fear. I'm sure there was some level of fear or not knowing what would happen. What was that determining factor that said, okay, I'm out of here, I gotta go?
Yeah, I came to New York in college when I was 20 years old. I had come to New York to cover my very first fashion week, and so before I got into politics, like I said, I was heavy into fashion, and so I studied journalism in college and had known that I wanted to be a magazine journalist pretty early on. I think the story in the family goes back to at least fourth grade that I decided that I wanted to be a journalist. I knew that I always wanted to talk to people and help people and tell stories, but I decided that I wanted to be a journalist, that I wanted to do it through magazines around fourth grade. And so the older that I got and the deeper that I got to school, I realized that New York was the media capital of the world, and that would probably be ultimately somewhere where, I would end up. And so I came to New York when I was 20 years old for Fashion Week, and I wanted to stay. And so I remember calling my parents and telling them that I had found my home and that I had never felt, so loved and accepted, and my heart came alive, and just all of the things that you say when you feel like when you feel like you're home. But my parents are like, "You are in school, like we are paying this tuition, and you're coming home." And so I never let go of that dream. But then life happened. If you remember, this was, I came out of school during the Great Recession. And so media started cratering right when I came out of school. The economy wasn't going well right when I came out of school. Digital journalism was changing, and Facebook and Google started to dominate digital advertising, which is how a lot of media companies made money. And so I came out of school really in no man's land, figuring out what I was going to do. So I got a job like most people do, and I, worked a job in financial services for years. And I'll never forget, as that job was coming to an end, what I would do is I had a blog at the time before I started working in magazines. So I had a fashion blog that I would do all of the things that I wanted to do in a magazine, but since I wasn't in New York, I had to find somewhere to put that creativity. Right. And so I had a fashion blog, and I would go into work early every morning. I would go into work and do all of my work for the day so I could work on my blog during business hours.
Wow.
It's funny now to think about it because it's so long ago, but like it. And so one day my boss, it was actually on my birthday, my 28th birthday. So my boss calls me to her desk, and she says, "When are you going to go to New York?" She said, "When are you going to go to New York?" She said, "You come in here every single day. You come in early before anybody else. It's still dark when you get here. You do all your work for the day in like 3 or 4 hours so you can work on your blog all day because that's really what you want to do." So she was like, when are you going to go to New York? And so at that point, that's when I started to like plan the logistics. And as Char mentioned, she's my cousin, and so she knows my dad, her uncle, and my dad is the type who you got to have a plan. If you're going to present something to him, you got to have a plan. You got to have all your bases covered, T's crossed, I's dotted. And so I put together a plan to move. And I'm sharing all of this detail because when I was doing it, it didn't feel scary until I got here.
Okay.
Leading up to it, it felt like if I don't go to New York now, like I'll never get there. I was getting laid off, so I knew that I was going to get severance. I knew that I would have as much money as I would ever have. So I knew that I had a few months to figure it out. And so I knew that I had 4 to 6 months to figure it out. So I said, okay, I'm a bet on me. I bet I can figure it out in 6 months. And I ended up getting a job at my dream magazine, at the magazine that I moved here for. I ended up getting a job in 4 months. And so it didn't feel scary until I got here. And then when I got here, it felt like a big deal. But it also, that's what dreams are supposed to be big.
Yes.
So I try not to make it. I was still deserving of New York, even though it was a big deal or a big risk. And I think that's one of the messages that I often share with people is that the bigness of your dream that shouldn't be a consideration, because all of our dreams, are big, but that doesn't mean that we're less deserving of them because they're bigger than ourselves.
Yes.
As big as New York was, I grew into it. And now I'm thinking about the next thing. And so every time you notch a dream, every time you grab one of those dreams that feels bigger than you grow into it. And then you get a bigger dream, and then you take another. And so I'm at the point now to where it's like, I'm thinking about the next thing.
That's awesome. I love how you point out that, your dreams are supposed to be big and they're supposed to be scary. So I really, I've enjoyed watching you. When you were younger, I had the honor of babysitting you for my monies to get my fashion on. I can remember in the small town that I grew up in, I would come to Dallas in the summers and babysit for you guys, and we would go shopping, and there was just all of those things. So it's been so awesome to just watch you, to see you step out and just do something that is just really amazing. So one of the things that you talked about has been, starting into fashion. You started with fashion. You had a heart for fashion, and you were doing really well in that. So in your introduction, you mentioned that you kind of felt like there was a gap. So talk to us a little bit about, that gap and the passion and interest that you found in, going into a political arena.
Yeah, so I think, and if you look at my about page, I talk about it a little bit. So if anyone is kind of interested, you can go to supercreator.news/about, and I kind of talk about that. When you're from underserved or overlooked community, everything is political. Like you really don't. To be apolitical is a privilege. It's usually reserved for people who already have privileges that they won't lose. And so if you take a step back, almost everything we do, from the food that we eat to the music that we listen to there are like political intersections through everything that we do. And so when I took a step back and started to ask myself, why do I love fashion so much, is because fashion gives overlooked and underserved communities a voice. That you get to express yourself, you get to say something to the world, where they have to listen even though they don't hear you. And so if you're a Black woman or a gay man, or someone from the trans community, or non-binary, or an indigenous person, if you're from any marginalized community who often is ignored, who often doesn't have a voice, music, creativity, the arts, fashion is a way for you to like express yourself and be heard. And so I realized that's what I loved so much about fashion, is that there was always a new way to express yourself, that twice a year there were going to be new collections, that there were going to be new trends, that trends from the 70s were going to come back with new twists. And so I loved that there was always a new, fresh way to express yourself. But behind that is a multi-billion-dollar international business.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned is that a lot of the people who set the trends, a lot of the people who tell the stories, often don't get to keep the value that those stories generate, that they often don't get to reap the benefits or enjoy the fruits of their labor, that it's often going to a corporate executive who has not used their creativity, but just happened to go to the right school at the right time and meet the right people and get the right promotion and right place, right time. And for a lot of us, we just don't have that opportunity. And a lot of that is rooted in policy. A lot of who wins and who loses is rooted in public policy. And underneath public policy is politics. Politics determines what policies get passed, what policies get shelved, what policies go to the floor, what policies you hear about, what policies you don't hear about. And so once I started to kind of get underneath the layers of the aesthetics of fashion and start to realize like fashion, music, any type of creative endeavor is governed by our political process. I wanted to take a step back and try to make as many people aware of why person A wins and why person B loses. And it often, and the last point that I want to make, the reason that this is so important to me is because we're often made to believe it's our fault. That if we worked a little harder, that if we went to the right school, but most of our lot in life is determined before we even know it. Most of our lot in life is determined by our zip code, by where you're born. And if you're born in the wrong place, do you get out in time? And if you're born in the right place, do you stay there? And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is take politics, which is often viewed as divisive and overwhelming and all of the things that people think about politics, is take a step back and say it is those things, but Supercreator is not. So treat Supercreator as a safe space for you to figure out what terms mean that you may not know. I try to use the newsletter and politics as a way to say, okay, Char, you focus on your business. You focus on your podcast. But once a day, you're going to get this newsletter that's going to tell you everything that you need to know so you feel informed, so you feel important. One last thing I want to share is there's a section in my newsletter called Today in Politics. And every day I list what the important people in government are doing for the day. And so the president, the vice president, people in Congress, what they're doing for the day. And so a reader reached out to me and said, oh my gosh, I love that section, but it's new. I'm curious, why did you add it? And I asked, I said, do you pay taxes? And they were like, yeah. And I said, well, because you're paying for all of this. You're paying for this. And so it's important for you to know where the president is going to be, even if you don't care. Like you deserve to know what the president is doing with your money. You deserve to know if Congress is in or out. You deserve to know that the House is in today and that the Senate is out today. You deserve to know that, you know, the First Lady is going to be doing this event or that event, because the taxpayers are paying for all of that. And so even something as fundamental as what the president is doing today, creative people have a right to know, even if it doesn't inherently impact their day-to-day creativity.
Right. And so why do you think, because politics can be one of those things, and we've been taught to not talk about real estate, or not real estate, but religion and politics, like those were really sticky areas to talk about in general. So why do you think that instead of, you know, digging deeper like you are, where you're peeling back the layers to make this palatable? Because I think sometimes, like you said, politics can be overwhelming, especially if you just don't understand it. You don't know what's going on, and how do you fit in with politics? And like you said, we are affected by everything that happens, and I mean all of us are affected by everything that happens in public policy and then politics. So why do you feel like that there's been this gap between why we shouldn't be talking about politics?
Yeah, because most people who have the power want to maintain the status quo. So it actually is if I have the power and I want to keep the power and I didn't actually earn the power, it's actually in my best interest for you not to know what a filibuster is. It's actually for example, the House is passing a bill today that's known in Washington as an omnibus. OMNIBUS. So it's known in politics as an omnibus.
Okay.
So what it really is a comprehensive government funding bill. And what an omnibus does is it funds the government through the rest of the fiscal year.
Got it. Stop right there. We are going to break for so that we can honor our sponsors, and we'll come right back because we do want to hear all about that.
You are watching Chit Chat with Char, hosted by Charmaine Byers and powered by The Difference, the voice of small businesses and the communities they serve. Today's show is made possible by the following small business partner: Home Title Lock, home title protection with up to $1 million guarantee in case of fraud. Ace of Gold Online Texas, real estate school and courses, offering Trek-approved pre-licensing, CE, SAE, and broker licensing courses. Smart Credit Monitoring helps you control your credit score, money, and identity, all in one place. Phone.com. Phone.com is the modern, work from anywhere solution for today's agile, mobile, and always on entrepreneurs and growing businesses. Cornet, business asset and liability protections. Our business filing experts will help you get your business moving. Start a business, incorporate or form an LLC today with Cornet. For more info about our sponsors and their services, or if you'd like info on how you and your business can sponsor this show or others like it, just check the show description or in the comments for the relevant links. And now back to the show.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay, so omnibus is where we left off. So go back into the description of it and then go forward. Thank you.
Yeah, so basically every year Congress has to pass a bill that funds all of the government agencies. So all of the government agencies, they got to get their money. And so basically Congress passes a bill every year that funds the government for the fiscal year. And so if you've ever heard of a government shutdown, that means that the government shuts down because there's no money. So Friday, the government runs out of money if Congress doesn't pass an omnibus. But if you don't do what I do, or if you're not like a political obsessive and you just don't pay attention to this stuff every day, and you hear the word omnibus, who has time to go Google it and figure out what it is? And so when I talk about it in my newsletter, I talk about a comprehensive government funding bill. And then I explain that it's going to fund the government through the rest of the fiscal year. And the reason that that's important is because the government probably should have passed one last year because funding runs out again in September. So even in this case, it's not even an annual bill. It's a bill that should have been passed last year that runs out in September. The reason that I say all of that is because when you have that context, that makes sense. It's like, oh, I got to have a budget every year. I got to, allocate things to rent and car note and insurance and all. That makes sense. But when you say omnibus, what is that?
What is that? Yeah.
Last year, everyone was talking about the filibuster. Filibuster this, filibuster that. Voting rights can't be passed because Republicans are filibustering. What does that mean? And the reason that I make that distinction is because if you look at how they treated our enslaved ancestors, they did two things. The first thing is that they broke apart the family.
Okay. Yes.
With your family, you can do anything. So we broke the family was broken apart first. And then the second thing was we are going to limit knowledge. We're going to keep you from getting knowledge, because if you don't have knowledge, then you're not self-empowered. You always have to listen to someone else for their truth. Well, if you know what's going on in politics, if you know what's in the omnibus, then you get to say, hey, representative, that does not make sense to me. Why does our district need $8 billion for XYZ?
Right.
I think our dollars should be spent on that. But if you don't know if you don't even know what an omnibus is, you're not even going to think to know, let me look and see what's in it for my district. And what that does is it preserves the status quo. It preserves the people who already have the power. So the reason that there's a knowledge gap is because it's actually in the interests of the people who have the power and want to keep the power, or the people who want power and they have a path to the power.
So have you always been interested in politics?
I've always been political, but I didn't think that I had permission to be a political journalist. There aren't many people who look like me, who come from where I came. I didn't give myself permission to do the kind of reporting that I did. I thought that, hey, I'm a gay Black man. People like me do fashion. And even being a journalist, I would go to fashion shoots and people would think that I was the makeup artist or the hairstylist. People would be like, oh, you're the writer? Because there aren't a lot of people who look like me who are like writers. So even when it comes to political journalism, there aren't a lot of people who look like me. And if you don't see it, you can't be it. And so one of the things that I did is that I know these things. I've always paid attention to these things. I've always had a curiosity around how systems and institutions work. I've always been curious about, okay, why do things work the way that they work? And again, you've known me since I've always asked questions, and I've always wondered about things that don't make sense. Right. And a lot about our government does not make sense to me. And so one of the ways that I get things done is by asking questions. If you look at my career as a journalist, I'm actually getting paid to ask questions. Yeah. So there's an inherent belief that if a reporter emails you with a question, that's their job. And so I use my work as a way to ask questions about, like, why do things work the way that they work? And so I've always been political. I don't think that I ever thought that I could be a political reporter.
Got it. So through this journey of being a political reporter, what have been some of the most impactful things that you've experienced?
I broke my first exclusive yesterday. So I broke my first exclusive story yesterday, which is a big deal because Supercreator is an independent journalist. It's not an ABC or CNN. It's something that, I started. And so I've been working on the story for a while, and so I was excited to break that. And so that's on, the supercreator.news right now. For me, the biggest impact for me is just day in and day out. I meet new sources at the White House and Congress. I was, texting with a source in Congress this morning before I hopped on here. And again, that's something that I would have never dreamed of, that I would, talk to people in Congress or talk to people at the White House and get answers on behalf of my reader. So the impact is felt every day. And that's really important for me because I try to build my life in a way where there's like joy and impact every day, where it's not a surprise. I think a lot of us treat joy and treat breakthrough as something that like happens, every blue moon, and it's a big deal when it happens. And I try to set my life up in a way that every day something impactful happens, and that I can find impact in everything that I do. And so the fact that I write a daily newsletter, it goes out every day, and I know that one person learns something that they didn't know before, is I go into the day knowing my newsletter it's scheduled before I wake up. So by the time I wake up, I know that the day's already been impactful because I know what's in that issue that I'm sending that's reaching your inbox, that morning.
So one of the things that I enjoy about the newsletter is that it is very fresh content. So if it's stuff that's going on in the world, it's not a delayed response. It's something that I know I can quickly go to and get like a quick overview of what's happening, right, real time, if you will. So how is that structured? How are you able to do that? Are you up into the wee hours of night to be able to
it depends. I mean, sometimes when things happen, like the State of the Union last week was late night into the early morning for me. And so sometimes, if news breaks, I do want to be responsive to it and kind of know what's going on. The biggest thing for me is to be an expert. And so for me, it's the things that I cover, I need to have a baseline of knowledge. So when something happens, I'm not starting from scratch, if that makes sense. So to use the omnibus example again, the House is going to vote on the omnibus. Well, I already have kind of a working knowledge, and I have notes, and I have just kind of a file on how government spending already works. And so when I'm thinking about it, it's not that I'm starting from scratch and Googling things and all of that, because there's just no time, because I'm always on deadline. I'm on deadline from Sunday to Thursday, really. My newsletter goes out Monday through Friday. From Sunday afternoon to Thursday night, hopefully, if the news lets me, I'm on deadline. And so there's really no time for me to be learning things about the things that I'm covering. I have to have a baseline knowledge. So that's the first thing that is important for journalists, is to kind of have a working knowledge of the things that they cover. So that helps a lot. But in terms of the practical, what my day looks like, I typically wake up and I kind of check the news to make sure that nothing happened, overnight. I try when I'm asleep to be asleep, when I'm off to be off. I try to unplug as much as I can. So I'll wake up and I'll check the news to see what's going on. The great thing about Supercreator is that it's a next day newsletter. So even though there's a lot of what's happening today in the newsletter, like you said, it does kind of give you an overview of what just happened. And the reason that's important for me is so you have context that you may have heard that, Russia invaded Ukraine. What does that mean for me? What does that mean for me as an American? And so I kind of use the newsletter as a way to look ahead and look back. So we're right here. Let's look ahead at what's going to happen today. But also, let me fill you in on what all of this means that happened yesterday. So I wake up, I look at the news, and then I start kind of drafting questions for sources. If, I want to ask Char, hey, how did you guys get to this decision? Or who all was involved with this decision? So I make lists of questions and I reach out to sources, and I do that pretty much throughout the day. And then finally, at some point, it varies different. It's different every day, but at some point I look at the clock and I say, I got to write my newsletter. I got to sit down and write it. And I take all my notes, all my recording, because you got to understand things are coming to me via text, email, people are calling me, I'm calling them. And so really what it is, to use a medical term, it really is triaging the day. It's really taking all of this information that has happened and then figuring out, okay, how do I put this in a newsletter format? My newsletter has it has a structure and a format to it. So as I'm going through the day, I'm like, oh, that's going to be great for read all about it. As I'm going through the day, it's like, oh, that's great for first things first. So as I'm working throughout the day, that structure allows me to say, oh, this will be great for that. I'm going to put that in there. And if it doesn't have a place to go, I say, you know what, I'm going to save that, for later. And so it's really, the best way to describe it is it's putting together a puzzle every day. It's
Right.
putting together. I start with a scattered puzzle with all of these different pieces. And then just throughout the day, I'm just putting little pieces together. And if I'm missing a piece, then I go get it. It's like, hey, Char, I'm missing this piece of information about this.
Right.
Can you help me find it? And so I do that, and then I schedule the newsletter, and I try to, give myself a break. I try to, call my niece and nephew, or watch a Netflix show, or do something that doesn't have to do with politics.
Right. To break
the hours, the hours. I mean, there are no, set hours. I do try to have things done by certain times of the day. I have little milestones that say, if your reporting isn't done by this time, you're going to be against the clock. But
Right.
you really know where the news takes you. For people like me, you love it. You love that. You never kind of know where the news is going to take you.
Right. This is, let's break off so that we can honor our sponsors. We're at that point, and we'll come right back. I see that you are so passionate about this, and I'm excited to continue the conversation. So let's break off.
The Difference Radio, live stream and podcast, the voice of small businesses and the communities they serve. Over the last 24 months, The Difference has evolved into a powerful internet media company that helps small businesses and local communities and nonprofit organizations create, produce, broadcast, and distribute a variety of shows, all designed to empower our communities, the businesses, the people, the places, and the events that make our cities, communities, and the folks that live there so very special.
With almost 1.5 million viewers and listeners in the last 2 years, The Difference and its unique strategy of positive impact branding has helped communities and small businesses be seen, be heard, and be remembered.
In a world that is consumed with negative press, media manipulation, and propaganda, The Difference, along with many others who believe in and support The Difference, understand that there is no better way to make the difference in our communities than to highlight the unsung heroes and high achievers that call our towns and communities home. And we wanted to create a platform that does just that. One that brings awareness to and reminds folks of the goodness that lives within so many of us and our neighbors.
And don't forget to hit that like, follow, and subscribe button, and tune in each week so you can experience the difference.
All right. Thank you so much for that. So you talked about time management is pretty much what I got out of that last little segment there, and being able to take a break when it's time to take a break so that you're refreshed when you can. Get this, the media it's just so much. And for me, it can be overwhelming. So for you as a reporter, I can only imagine what that must be like for you. So in addition to you, taking time when you're time to rest, you're resting. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other things that you're doing to manage your time?
I use a lot of apps, a lot of technology. I have an app that I use where if I see some news throughout the day that I'm not able to get to right away, there's a button that I press and it sends it right to, it's called Instapaper. And so when I can't deal with it right now, I put it, I press the button, it goes to my Instapaper, and when I'm ready to deal with it, I deal with it. And I just really, for me, I've gotten really disciplined about the things that I cover and the things that I don't cover. And so one of the things that's important, if you're a creative person, is knowing the things that you don't do, or knowing the things that are non-negotiable, or knowing the things that take up your time that you don't want to give energy to. And so I'm really particular. The newsletter covers a lot of things, but I'm really, focused on a few topics. And even if I'm talking about something like an international crisis that's going on in Ukraine, I always bring it back to, okay, how does this impact creative people? How does this impact, people of color? How does this impact queer people? How does this impact the people who read my newsletter? So even though it's a big story, I'm always thinking, okay, but what does this mean to, so having that focus really, helps me, it really helps me kind of keep my blinders on. The other thing is I talk to people who know more than me. I don't believe that I have to know everything. I believe that there are people who know how to do a podcast. And so I'm like, what, if, doing a podcast is something that I can't fit into my day, let me call Char and ask her. Like, I don't believe I have to be the answer for everything. And so if I know something about student loan debt, I go find an expert. I go find someone who works in education. I go find someone who works in government to explain it. And so I think having that humility to know, like, I am human and there's only so much that I can do really
Right.
makes things easy for me when I'm not able to do it. Because it's like, you already know you're human. You already know that there are limitations to what you can do. You already know that your energy is finite. And so when you get tired, it shouldn't be a surprise. Like, you should be tired. And so really just remembering that, like, I'm a human and that I'm not a robot, that I'm not, here to, meet someone's quota, that I'm here to do, impactful, meaningful journalism really helps me, keep things where they need to be. The other thing is, I use a word, I talk about grace a lot and giving myself the grace to take things as they come. And when, things don't work out, I give myself the grace to have the feelings. Or when the news is heavy, I give myself a moment before I start reporting on it. I think about, what does this mean for me? The other week I was on a press call with the families of Amir Locke, a young Black man who was killed in Minnesota, I believe, last month, and George Floyd's family was on the call, and Dante Wright's family, and all of these families who've lost Black men, to police violence were on this press call. And I remember after the call, I took a step back and thought about how that made me feel as a human first, as a person as a Black man who has a family, who, has seen so much of this terror happen in my lifetime. I took a step back and I processed that. And I was with the news before I reported the news. And so I think that that's really a responsibility of mine, to make sure that I'm clear-minded and clear-eyed when I'm getting ready to tell you what you should be paying attention to. So those are just some things that kind of help me keep things in perspective.
That, you said a couple of things there. One is delegation. I think that's so important as a small business owner, to know what your strengths are, to know that, this is what I'm good at and this is what I'm not good at. And being able to be, like you said, have enough humility to know that, okay, I'm not great at that, so I'll delegate that. So I love how you pointed that out. That's a great point. And then giving yourself grace. It's so important to give yourself grace. And I can't imagine, you having to cover stories that feel so close to home. So for me, and I'm sure like many other people, when there's stories like that, sometimes I tend to shut off the news. I'm not interested in hearing it or listening to it because it's too heavy. It's too heavy of a topic to deal with. When you think about, like you said, the terror of, Black men who have been brutalized and murdered by police, it's harsh, especially when you're a mother of, young men, and your husband is Black, and cousins and uncles. Like it's really scary, and it could be very heavy. So the fact that you give yourself grace before reporting is important, because it's hard to report the facts on something like that when you live it. Right. I think without, reporting your own personal feelings about a situation. And I think some of the media outlets, that's what's happening. They're reporting some facts and more feelings versus just get to the point of what's really happening and state the facts.
And not to cut you off, I think that's really the reason why there has to be a representation. There has to be, for so long, journalism was represented by a small, wealthy, well-connected group of mostly, straight white men who told the stories and who told the news of the day. Even in journalism school, when you're learning about the legends, you learn about Cronkite and Morrow, and they're all, Dan Rather, and they're all white men. And so you learn coming up that, like, this is the pinnacle. This is what, world-class journalism looks like. And that informs your idea of, like, who gets to tell the stories and how they get to tell the stories. And so one of the things that's important for me is to make sure that there's a voice because you need to know that the police, are brutalizing, Black men, but there's a way that, it can be told empathetically. There's a way that, I don't need to show you the video because you've seen it before. And so for me, I don't have to use, I don't know if I can say this but trauma porn is what a lot of people call it, is this idea of using trauma as a way to arouse. And I don't have to do that for people who already know what that looks like. Right. I don't have to show you. I just have to tell it, like, this is what's being done about it or not being done about it. And so I think one of the things that's really important to me, and this is one of the things that I tell new sources when I meet them, that Supercreator readers trust me. And they trust me in a way to where a lot of people say, you know what, I used to watch Morning Joe every morning. I don't even watch Morning Joe anymore. Because I just know I'm going to get your newsletter and it's going to help me. And one of the things that's really important for me is to let sources know, hey, this is a story that needs to be told, and it needs to be told in a way that's respectful of the person on the other side, not just respectful of your message or how you're trying to spin it or what you want people to know or think people shouldn't know or what's fake news and what's not fake news. On the receiving end of this information is another person.
Right.
Their experiences deserve to be honored. Their experiences deserve to be considered when we're thinking about, the news of the day, and not just what's going to go viral or what's going to get me a book deal or what's going to get me on, the Daily Show as a guest, appearance. Those are all things that matter. Because at the end of the day, I'm just as competitive as the next journalist. Hell, I was talking about an exclusive I got yesterday. So I'm just as competitive as any other colleague. And I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm above the things that drive reporters. I want the story first. I want all of those things, but I think inherent to my reporting is my lived experience. And I think one of the things that journalism can do a better job of is inviting more people with different lived experiences to the table, so those experiences can inform the reporting that they send out into the world.
Absolutely. Because I think, and that's part of the reason for me why I shut it down, because it's just too heavy. It's too,
and it's not for you.
And
it's not for you. And I think one of the things that we've got to do as a media, I guess, as an industry, is look at who is our journalism for? Is our journalism serving me, my colleagues? Am I writing for other reporters, or am I writing for Char or the Supercreator, case may be? So
and I think when you have that audience where who are you writing for, it softens the message.
Absolutely.
While it can still be very real and very vulgar, but it's presented in a way that is not as harsh. Like for me, it's easier for me to read the news versus seeing or hearing it, because seeing it and hearing it is too much for me sometimes. Like I'm very sensitive and an empath. So it's like I feel everything. So for me, it's reading it so that I can digest it. I can stop when I want to. I can pick it back up. I can pause and listen to it and digest it, all in the same setting, where with media, it's just thrown at you. And it's like, wow, that was a lot.
Right.
How do I can't even comprehend it because it was coming so fast.
Yeah. And those are editorial decisions that I make throughout the day as I'm looking at, as I mentioned earlier, throughout the day, I'm putting the newsletter together in my head. And so I'm thinking about, okay, what did I talk about yesterday? Yeah. And, how's that going to impact? If I'm talking about something heavy again, I kind of write little lines of, just a heads up, another story about Russia and Ukraine today, just to kind of give you okay, let me get myself. So I try to, again, think about. And one of the things about being an empath, one of the things about, demonstrating empathy that thankfully comes a lot easier for me than a lot of my colleagues is that that's the first question that I ask. The first question I ask is, how does this affect my reader? When they read this in the morning, because again, a lot of people are waking up to me.
Yeah.
A lot of people are having Supercreator with their coffee.
Yeah.
A lot of people are walking into their office. They're starting their day with a newsletter about politics. And I don't take that for granted. And so I think, again, I'm hoping that by demonstrating to these powerful institutions that there's another way to do journalism, that will start to endear people and say, hey, I was going to talk to this newsletter, but I'm going to talk to Supercreator instead.
Right.
And the more success I have, the more success for the next newsletter like Supercreator. So that's how I think about it, as offering sources and alternative. These are the people that you usually work with. These are the people who you usually give your stories to. These are the people that you usually, share information with. But here's why, Supercreator is an alternative that you can trust.
Right. I love it. I'm so proud of you. I'm just so excited for you in this journey, and for you stepping up to the plate to deal with something that is really needed. I know that, not only in the African American community, but there are a lot of us who just don't have the understanding of politics, and for you to put it in a way that we understand it. It's in layman's terms. Some of the words are not like, what is this? And where do we even start to understand what it is? I'm just proud of you for taking that step to kind of soften the blow when it comes to the media industry, because it's a mess out there. When I think about media on that last sponsorship break that we had, there was a clip in there about, fake news and creating this fear and all of the things that the media does that doesn't benefit us.
Yeah. And that's actually what I was going to say, but you raise a great point, Char, is that there are a lot of costs that come to this kind of journalism. I'm a subscription supported business, so I get paid, like subscribers pay, pay my bills. And certain advertisers, don't want the story to be told a certain way. And so I want to be clear that there are trade-offs with everything that you decide to do. And so for me, I don't want to make it seem like that there's not a cost to deciding to tell the news a certain way. There are, again, certain sources who only want to go to the newsletter with the highest number of eyes. Yeah. If you're a subscription supported business, you're always going to have less because the incentives are different. And so for me, I want to be clear. And I don't want to, tell an incomplete story that, it's easy to, to make the editorial choices that I make every day, or more people would be making them.
Absolutely.
Something that, people are going to watch and say, they're going to say, well, why don't more super creators exist? People ask me this all the time. Why isn't there more of this? And because the business models don't support it.
Right.
It actually is a financial risk to do this kind of journalism versus just saying stuff out there. I'll tell a quick story. This morning, some news broke and I reached out to a source and I just asked, I said, hey, is this true? That was literally the question. The email was like, hey, is this true? And the source wrote back, no, it's not true. And so,
wow.
Why do you think that it was reported? And because once it's out there, it's hard to get it back. It's hard to put that in the bottle. It's hard to, and so it's a lot of that adage that a lot of people say, ask for forgiveness, not permission.
That's right. That's right.
It's like, you know what? I'll ask you to forgive me, Char, before I ask for permission.
That's right. And that's unfortunately a lot of, what's happening is people won't ask for permission. Yeah. And then, like you said, things are out there and you can't take it back. I'm going to take this opportunity to break away one more time so that we can honor and support our sponsors who make this show possible.
You are watching Chit Chat with Char, hosted by Charmaine Byers and powered by The Difference, the voice of small businesses and the communities they serve. Today's show is made possible by the following small business partner: Home Title Lock, home title protection with up to $1 million guarantee in case of fraud. Ace of Bull Online Texas, real estate school and courses. offering Trek-approved pre-licensing, CE, SAE, and broker licensing courses. Smart Credit Monitoring helps you control your credit score, money, and identity, all in one place. Phone.com. Phone.com is the modern, work from anywhere solution for today's agile, mobile, and always on entrepreneurs and growing businesses. Cornet, business asset and liability protections. Our business filing experts will help you get your business moving. Start a business, incorporate or form an LLC today with Cornet. For more info about our sponsors and their services, or if you'd like info on how you and your business can sponsor this show or others like it, just check the show description or in the comments for the relevant links. And now back to the show.
Oh my goodness, so much information. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of things. What's next for Supercreator? I know that you just did your first exclusive. Congratulations on that. What's next?
Just more of the same. I think, for me, there's a certain point in terms of how big I want the newsletter to be, to where it's still something that I can manage and I can own, and not something that's like too big for myself or a small team. But I'm just getting started. I think when you think about, there's so many stories waiting to be told. There are so many people who haven't had their stories told before, haven't been represented in media, who now see Supercreator as the answer. And so it's really important for me to make sure that there's an infrastructure in place that like my business can support kind of where I'm going. More specifically, there are big elections coming up. This year in November, there are a lot of primaries coming up, and it's really going to determine how things are going to go for the next year. So I'm thinking about how do you make that understandable? How do you put, midterm elections typically have very, very, very low turnout compared to presidential elections. And so how do you let people know, these are the stakes and, this is what is at stake, if this group of people have power versus this other group. And so really, I'm always looking at how can I be a better reporter? How can I craft, how can I master the craft a little bit more? And so as often as I try to look ahead, I often focus where my feet are, because that's really where the work is done. This exclusive yesterday is months in the making. It just didn't happen. It's through day in and day out, just doing the work, putting your head down, keeping going when the days get hard, not getting too up when the days, are well, just knowing that, there are times when you're up, there are times, when you're down, and just focusing on what is, who am I doing this for? Why am I doing it? What am I doing? That kind of points me to where's next. And the reason that it's important to be open to what the universe has for you is because I never thought that I would be a political reporter. Yeah. Like I thought that I would work at the magazine that I worked at forever, and then it shut down. Yeah. And so that wasn't in the plans. And to be honest with you, had I known that the magazine was going to shut down, I may not have moved. I may have said, you know what, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And so being open to like everything is redeemable, that there's nothing that happens to me that's like outside of me. There's nothing that I can't redeem. There's nothing that I can't fix or detour or whatever. It gives you the freedom to kind of go where the call is, go where the assignment is. And so I'm so grateful. You said earlier, you expressed, gratitude and pride about me stepping up. That's really what happens when you just gotta go where you're needed.
Yes.
So you know what, the call right now, even if it's just a whisper, is that, what people would love to engage in the political process a little bit more if they just knew a little bit more.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, what, I have the skills and the knowledge and the passion for that. I can, I can do that. And the last thing I share, because I know we're coming up on time, is self-nominate yourself. A lot of us have been taught to like wait until we're chosen.
Yes.
Wait until we're picked. If I were to wait until someone picked me to be I would probably be waiting still. I would probably be waiting for the person to say, you know what, I think you can do political journal. Come on down.
Yes.
Sometimes you gotta say, knock, knock, I'm here.
Right.
You have to look at the table and say, there's not a seat for me. I brought my own chair. I got a chair for me to pull up. a lot of my career has been me being courageous enough. For some people will say courageous enough, other people will say silly enough to say, like, why can't there be room for me?
Right, right.
Sometimes it takes that childlike. If you look at a kid going to the playground for the first time, they see other kids playing. They don't wait to be invited. They see other kids. They're like, I want to go play.
Right.
We lose a lot of that spirit. A lot of that spirit is taken out of us as we get older. And, if there's one thing that, someone takes away from this, not the political stuff, not the fashion stuff, it's the, like, if you're waiting for someone to nominate you, if you're waiting for someone to pick you, it may be you. You may be the one that you're waiting on.
That's right. I love that. So you basically just did what I was going to ask you to do, which is, let someone know what's on your mind. And you said that very thing that, sometimes you have to choose yourself. So I love that.
And go where the love is. There are also other people who are supporting you and rooting for you. And sometimes we're looking for certain people to love on us, and we're looking for certain people to support us. And then there's often an audience or a community of people who are already riding for you, who are already supporting you. And sometimes it's important to say, you know what? It would be nice if these people rocked with me, but I'm gonna go where the love is. I'm gonna go where the love already is, where I don't have to earn anyone's approval, where I don't have to. That's been a big breakthrough for me.
And that's really important, because when you are spending that time and energy trying to fight for the love and support, that's energy that could be used to hone in on your craft and your skill. Absolutely. And further developing who you are. So that's a great point. I want you to share with our audience and our listeners, our viewers, how they can reach you. I know your information is scrolling across the bottom, but share with us how they can reach you, how they can subscribe to your newsletter, your daily newsletter, and anything else that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so you can reach me. The best way to support the work and the best way to keep in touch with me is just by subscribing to the newsletter at supercreator.news/subscribe, or because you're so amazing, you can get 15% off your first year if you sign up at supercreator.news/Char. So CHAR. Up with 15% off your first year. You can reach me on Twitter. I don't use Instagram or Facebook or any of the other, but I'm often on Twitter for work. So you can reach me at by Michael Jones, or you can email me at Michael MICHAEL at supercreator.news. And so those are the best ways to reach me and keep in touch. And a lot of people will tell you, I try to be accessible. I try to answer questions as they come. And so don't be afraid to reach out. If I don't have it to give, I'll let you know, or I'll point you to somewhere where you can get the information.
I am just, like I said, I'm just gleaming with pride to see you in this light and to see all that you have done. I'm so proud of you. And keep up the good work. I do want to have you back on, because I know that there are youngsters who would want to get into journalism, and maybe not on a political level, but just want to get into journalism as a whole. I would love for you to share some
I'd love to come back.
ideas on how to make that happen, because sometimes some things just seem so far away when we have people right in our community that can help us get to the next level, get to the next step. Wishing you all the very best.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for this platform. Thank you for creating this opportunity for us. So it's been a pleasure to be here, and I can't wait to come back. So yeah, let's make that happen.
Yes, sir. One of the things that you talked about, the platform, and we talked about delegation. I just want to give shout outs to Lyndon, who is the producer of our show. Like, none of this would be possible had it not been for him holding me accountable and pushing. So, I give all credit to him for helping me to realize this dream of having a podcast for a platform just like this. And I'm just thankful to God that our ideas and everything aligned so that we have this awesome partnership. So I love you, wishing you all the best. And I hope you have a great day today.
Thank you. We'll talk soon, okay?
Yes, sir. Love you.
Love you too.
Bye.
Difference Radio, live stream, and podcast, the voice of small businesses and the communities they serve.
Over the last 24 months, The Difference has evolved into a powerful internet media company that helps small businesses and local communities and nonprofit organizations create, produce, broadcast, and distribute a variety of shows, all designed to empower our communities, the businesses, the people, the places, and the events that make our cities, communities, and the folks that live there so very special.
With almost 1.5 million viewers and listeners in the last 2 years, The Difference and its unique strategy of positive impact branding has helped communities and small businesses be seen, be heard, and be remembered.
In a world that is consumed with negative press, media manipulation, and propaganda, The Difference, along with many others who believe in and support The Difference, understand that there is no better way to make the difference in our communities than to highlight the unsung heroes and high achievers that call our towns and communities home. And we wanted to create a platform that does just that. One that brings awareness to and reminds folks of the goodness that lives within so many of us and our neighbors.
And don't forget to hit that like, follow, and subscribe button and tune in each week so you can experience The Difference.